Welcome everyone. I think we should start. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are excited to bring to you the 18th webinar of Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific, where we'll explore the evaluation of energy efficiency in Asia Pacific with a focus on technologies, behaviors, and the role of evidence. My name is Nazir. I'm your host for today's webinar and a coordinator with Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific, which is a vibrant community of energy and evaluation professionals across the Asia Pacific region. Before going to the webinar, I would like to inform you all that this webinar is being recorded. We would also like to welcome you all to introduce yourself in the chat, sharing your name, country, and organization. And also, if you could respond to a small icebreaker question, what small change you have made in your daily life to save energy? Anything you would like to share with all of us? While you are doing that, I would like to share with you some housekeeping rules. First of all, as I said, this session is being recorded, and we assume that by attending and participating, you give your consent for this to happen. But if you have any concern, please feel free to reach out to us later on. I would like to request you all to keep your microphones muted when you're not speaking. We will have a discussion session at the end where we will take questions from all of you. You can switch on your cameras for better engagement if you feel like. Please feel free to use the chat box for questions. The speakers will respond to the questions either at the end of the session, or they may also respond directly in the chat. We will be sharing with you a quick feedback form at the end of the session, and we will be happy to get your feedback, comments, and suggestions. We will be uploading the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel, and it will also be uploaded on our website. We will be sharing the recording along with the summary notes and as well as slides from the presenters. Today's agenda look like this. We will start with welcome remarks from Edward Wine, who is the member of Steering Committee of Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific. Then we will have presentations from our two keynote speakers for today's webinar, who will be introduced in a while. We'll have around 10 to 15 minutes for moderated discussion and question and answer, and then we will end at around 11 a.m. Bangkok time. So let me invite Edward Wine, who is the member of Steering Committee of Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific and an affiliate at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, for welcome remarks and sharing the context of the webinar. Ed, over to you.
Hi there. I'm just setting up the slides. Just a quick note about EEAP, Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific. For those not familiar with EEAP, it's a not-for-profit established in 2018. We've had work a few years before that, but that's the official time we established it. And it's modeled after two other conferences, one in the US since 1983, held every 2 years, called the International Energy Program Evaluation Conference, or IEPEC. And then we build on that for Europe since 2010, called the International Policy and Program Evaluation Conference. And now it's called Energy Evaluation Europe. And we try to support the evaluation of energy policy and programs in the Asia Pacific region, from, as we say, Pakistan to New Zealand and 30 countries in between. Anywhere evaluation's going on, we trying to both promote that and facilitate that where possible. And our mission is to take a leadership role in expanding the practice of and capacity for what we call the objective evaluation of both energy efficiency and renewable energy programs and policies. And how do we go about this? Well, we bring people together through our network. And as you probably know through LinkedIn is one other mechanisms Nazir can talk about. The other um, media we use. And we also have a database of resources on international best practices in energy evaluation. And as you can tell, we have these webinars and other events. We've had conferences in the Asia Pacific region, and then COVID came, we stopped it. We're trying to have another conference hopefully this year. And if you want to learn more, the website is listed below. So hopefully you'll try to find out more from us. Um, just want to make sure, yeah. There, I wanted to mention Eval Torch, and that is a symbol that people were using um, as a call to action, uniting the evaluation community to build a future where evaluation contributes to a more just and sustainable world. It started its journey, it's going around the world during the International Year of Evaluation 2015, and now it's being spread to over 70 countries. There have been 92 events. Um, it's traveling the world again, different areas around different countries to celebrate the progress made and inspire action to make evaluation future fit to address global challenges and opportunities. So as I mentioned, we're hoping for a conference later this year. Stay tuned, we'll definitely advertise it. And we're gonna have more webinars in the coming months. And we would like your feedback on this particular webinar, and Nazir will mention this later, but there is a form we'd like you to fill out so we can improve our webinars. We have two speakers, as Nazir mentioned, Alex Ableza from Climargy. He'll talk about the ESCO market in the Philippines. And then Sanjana Gurti will talk about social norms and smart metering. And both of these presentations are very exciting for me since I've worked in both these areas for over 25 years, both ESCOs in Europe and Japan, and behavior starting in California and elsewhere. So it's nice to see have presentations on this. And since I probably won't use another slide, I just want to present my last slide here about a new approach being used by ACEEE. Those not familiar with ACEEE, that's the American Council on an Energy Efficient Economy based in Washington, D.C. And now they're focusing, they focus on lots of work, but they're focusing on behavior and what they call no cost, that means free, behavioral science assistance for energy challenges, whether it's in transportation, buildings, or industry. And they're working closely with cities, utilities, nonprofits, and other partners to identify what are the key behavioral challenges in their programs, pinpoint barriers and opportunities using behavioral insights, prioritize and design solutions to test, from messaging strategies to program design, and then support implementation by troubleshooting through the process. And their focus, again, is on evaluating what works so they can refine strategies for greater impact. So you can go to this website, bearhub.net, or you can contact Ruben at rsussman@aceeee.org. This is great news for me, being, just as a quick note, when I first started working at Lawrence Berkeley Lab in 1978, all the focus was on technologies and trying to improve energy efficiency, which is great. We have come up with great new technologies, but I got involved early on in the behavioral side. So I'm really happy in today's talk, not only ESCOs, but behavior. So I think I will end here. Oh, let's see. Yeah, I will end here. Stop sharing. And then what I want to do before we go on to introduce our first speaker, which is Alex. Alex Ablaze is the CEO of Climargy. He's been working over 40 years in the energy efficiency and other clean energy development in 17 Asian markets in various organizations and strategies. And he provides his energy efficiency expertise with scaling up capital flows through innovative finance, investment structures, and policy reform. And for this talk in particular, he convened and chairs the Asia Pacific ESCO Industry Alliance, and you'll hear more about that, as well as the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance. He co-founded the Global ESCO Network and co-chairs a task force of the Global Coalition Mission Efficiency. So I think I'll stop here and listen in on what he has to say. So Alex, you can share your slide and start your presentation. You'll have about 15 minutes. And then we'll have some, we'll hold the questions to the end. We'd like to do that. So take it away, Alex.
Thank you so much, Ed, and good morning to everyone in Asia Pacific, and good evening, Ed. I'm not sure if there's anyone else outside the Asia Pacific time zones. So today I wear not my Climergy hat. The Climergy, by the way, is the world's pioneer privately owned super ESCO aggregator, a year older than Sophia in Canada and France. So, and this pioneer super ESCO happens to sit in Asia Pacific. Philippines specifically. But today I wear my nonprofit hats, the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance, which has a 17, 18-year history, the Asia Pacific ESCO Industry Alliance, and we now bring together, convene 10-country ESCO associations from China, India, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Taiwan, and Thailand. And as Ed mentioned, I'm a co-founder and I sit in the advisory board of the Global ESCO Network. And we had a Global ESCO Network meeting, and in ASEAN just last week, I presented on behalf of the Global ESCO Network, showing the findings of 25 ESCO markets globally, from the policy, the finance, the structure, the contract types around the world. So this might be an interesting topic for EEAP one day. But let me just talk about the Philippine ESCO market for this webinar. The PE2 again is a nonprofit. We have grown from a pure ESCO association, which is what we call regular A now, but we have new membership categories for technology solutions service providers. We have one for investors and financial services, another one for nonprofits, the academe and research, and the last one is the end users, the large end users. And it's interesting why create all these membership categories, because we believe that energy efficiency happens because you complete the ecosystem of stakeholders. You complete all the players in a massive market-wide transformation towards more efficient technology solution services and even capital. So we work on policy, market development. We collaborate with Asia Pacific and the Global ESCO network, and also grow our B2B networks. First, the PE2 mission to grow energy efficiency as the first fuel. It's all about really changing the way that the market positions energy efficiency from a net zero component to being a major third of the NDC obligations, positioning it as a primary energy resource that has to be dispatched with priority, and using financial mechanisms as if it was infrastructure, a clean energy source, and a new investment asset class. We believe that we have to bridge a $243 billion energy efficiency investment gap to shave off 182 million tons of oil equivalent through 2040. In the impacts, and this is where it becomes interesting for evaluators, because the impacts economically, from the economic standpoint, we avoid $720 billion in end use, in energy end use. We reduce dependence on imported fossil fuels. Philippines, with I think, just like Singapore, are the only two Southeast Asian countries which are not major oil and gas producers and are net energy importers. Energy efficiency industry is a separate economic activity apart from renewables. So it will have to generate its own incremental GDP growth. We also believe in PE2 that if we achieve our investment or capital mobilization targets, we'll be able to create over 9.1 million green jobs in the market. From the energy security standpoint, we are freeing up 45,900 megawatts or deferring energy infrastructure capital requirements for such infrastructure upgrades, whether it be energy production, generation, transmission, distribution. We also believe that the more energy efficiency investments are pumped into the market, the more that we will decelerate the rise in energy prices. Of course, from the climate standpoint, close to a third of our obligations, our Paris obligations, could be delivered through energy efficiency. Philippines has set its targets way before the law. So this chart, although it's a busy chart, it's the Philippines could always step up its ambition, but the chart demonstrates that it works across all energy end use sectors, whether it be government, commercial, residential, industrial, transport, and even utilities. So it's all about capturing all sectors, being a more inclusive a program through targets rather than cherry picking a certain end use sectors. It's been a 4-decade journey for the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Law. We've had a law in 1980, but it lapsed because at that time, the Energy Conservation Bill was only a knee-jerk reaction to oil embargoes due to Middle East tensions involving Kuwait at that time. So it was renewed, given a fresh 5-year term in 1985, but it again lapsed in 1990. So from 1990 to 2019, the Philippines slid back into a voluntary regime. And it was through a successive filing of the bill in both the House and the Senate to get the bill passed. And once we got the stars aligned, we finally found a law passed in April 2019, which we call Republic Act 11285. But the bill was better refined. It shifted the focus from energy conservation to energy efficiency. It also mainstreamed energy efficiency as a way of life and not just a band-aid remedy to energy shortages. And it also recognizes ESCO and third-party investors as a critical player in pushing new investments that have to be incentivized. The bill has provisions for defining roles for government. It creates a new body called an Interagency Energy Efficiency Conservation Committee, which has 9 ministers or 9 cabinet secretaries from finance to energy to development, planning and development. So it is a very strategic policy planning that gets government out of its silos and working together for accelerated implementation of energy efficiency in the public sector. It certifies individuals, professionals, and ESCOs. It sets energy performance standards, not only for products, but for vehicles and buildings as well. It sets designated obligations of designated establishments, and I will talk about this in a bit. It sets tax-based fiscal incentives as well as non-fiscal incentives such as awards programs. It forces state-owned banks to offer concessional finance to this new asset class. And on the other features, I'd like to mention this. Because I agree with Ed, because energy efficiency is about changing behavior. It's a combination of dangling carrots, not as big as we wanted them to be, but also whacking a big stick. So this is a law, one of the unique energy efficiency law, where the lower house introduced penal provisions, giving it up to 5 years criminal liability and up to $2 million in fines for airing enterprises, establishments, ESCOs, and even individuals found in violation of the law. The commercial, industrial, and transport establishments' consumption threshold were brought down to 50,001 kilowatt hours in fuel and electricity purchases a year. That means that it's not just the corporates and mid-markets. It goes down to the SMEs, the MSMEs across the commercial, industrial, and transport sector. So they have to do mandatory energy audits. They have to report their energy consumption. They have to set their energy efficiency program. They have to hire a certified energy manager. They have to set up an energy management system such as ISO 50001. And they have to meet a certain threshold for energy utilization index if you're an industrial establishment, building energy index if you own a commercial building or public building, or a vehicle and fleet economy performance rating if you have a transportation fleet. So again, this is a lot of interesting space for evaluators to work for from the programmatic standpoint. The government is doing the same. So across public buildings, initially, it's phasing out low efficiency air conditioning and lighting within a 5-year period. It has enabled now more innovative private capital mobilization schemes such as ESCO performance contracting procurement, public-private partnerships and build, operate, transfer, and even joint ventures for state-owned enterprises. Let's talk about money. We have to bridge, like we said, a $243 billion. We believe that a third of it could be mobilized through the self-finance, debt finance, lease finance, and what we call business as usual finance. So that 81 billion is going to happen. That's going to flow. What we will need is to put our heads together in how do we mobilize the balance of 162 billion. And that will have to flow largely outside the balance sheets of end users. And one of the main vehicles for this are ESCOs. So ESCOs will have to be a major vehicle for PPP transactions, for direct building performance contracts, for joint venture agreements, even for large-scale retrofit programs led by the government. ESCOs will have to play a role in delivering a bulk of the 162 billion capital gap for the country between now and 2040. The ESCO market is growing, and you see that the definition of ESCOs is very much aligned with the global definition of the global ESCO network. This is what the energy efficiency law in the Philippines and how it defines energy service companies. So what's important here is that it offers performance guarantees for the work it does, and it arranges finance. It takes a financial exposure or financial risk in issuing the performance guarantees related to the energy saving solution. This is a busy slide, but all I'm saying is that the government now has 2 tiers as it welcomes accreditation of ESCOs. There's a separate track for registered, which applies to startup ESCOs. And the more experienced ESCOs with track record go for the certified ESCO route. The number of ESCOs has been increasing significantly. You see that it's been growing in the last 10 years. It sort of plateaued during the pandemic, but it's getting into a exponential growth trend in the last few years. I just checked a 2 days ago, we now have 69 ESCOs registered and certified in the Philippines. And I think the
Alex,
most common.
just a few more minutes.
Yeah, okay. And the most common is cooling, but we're hoping that we will go to the other heat technologies but there's a lot of cooling, there's a lot of lighting, there's a lot of controls, and we hope that the motors, compressors, pumps also mainstream in the market. And all I'm saying is that there are many financial models, the self-financed, the debt and lease financed, and what is emerging in the market is where we get a third-party investor aggregating all ESCO project assets. And that first one would be Climergy, which is now behaving as that aggregator or doing portfolio investments across ESCOs, across technologies, across contracts. And my last slide shows that the policy environment, what the energy efficiency law provides, only strengthens ESCO market growth in the years to come. So I stop there and I look forward to your questions later during the webinar. Back to you, Ed.
Okay, thank you. This is great. I'm sure a lot of people have questions. You can, as Nazir mentioned, you can, in the chat function, start posting your questions there. We'll get to them after our second presenter. I have some questions too. So, but before I do that, I'd like to go to our next presenter, and she puts her slides up. Sanjanta Gorti leads JPAL South Asia's Air and Water Labs, which is aimed at carrying out evidence-based research and policy addressing the most pressing air and water challenges in South Asia. And she leads the strategy and execution of their work and working with all sorts of people, including the public and private sector, as well as universities. And she does provide strategic oversight to the energy, environment, and climate change sector there, working across air pollution, energy access, and market-based instruments. And she has contributed to the implementation of the world's first pilot emissions trading scheme for particulate matter in Gujarat. I'm probably mispronouncing this, Gujarat, and helps also in working in expanding market-based regulation for pollutants. So I think I'll stop there and hand it over to Sanjana, and you can take it over from here.
Thank you very much, Ed, and thank you all for joining from different time zones today. I'm super delighted to be here and talk about JPAL's work in generating evidence to address critical policy challenges. Today's webinar is primarily geared towards the energy demand side interventions, and I look forward to sharing some of our work and insights from completed and ongoing studies on this topic. So the presentation is structured as follows. I'll start off by setting the context, and then we look into some of the work that we have done on social comparisons, smart metering, real-time pricing and information campaigns, and subsidies. For those who might be slightly unfamiliar with JPAL's work, I'd just like to start off by talking about what we do and our approach in carrying out evaluations. JPAL is a network of over 2,000 researchers across the world, and we carry out research using randomized impact evaluations to answer critical questions in our fight against poverty. Our suite of services include research, policy, scale engagements, training and capacity building. Our global office is at MIT, and JPAL has more than 2,200 completed ongoing evaluations across 95 countries. We have 7 global offices. The South Asia office is the largest and the oldest, and I lead JPAL's work on the energy, environment, and climate change space at the South Asia office. As I mentioned, we essentially do randomized control trials, which is one of the most rigorous ways to estimate the causal impact of a given program. And our affiliated professors specialize in them in sectors like energy and environment, where policies often rely on untested projections. RCTs can help provide actionable evidence and help policymakers compare alternatives, allocate resources effectively, and wherever there are solutions that work, they could be scaled up effectively. So there are a lot of ways to reduce energy use, and we look at some of them in our subsequent slides. So we recognize the complexity of the energy and environment challenge, and actively exploring ways to tackle climate questions, especially that intersect with poverty and inequality. One of the most pressing questions that we face is how can we make people around the world have access to reliable, affordable energy to support growth and development, and do this without putting environment and climate at greater risk. And it's a tough balancing act. And finding solutions that might work for both the people and planet is extremely important. We have over 150 ongoing and completed evaluations in 19 countries within the energy, environment, and climate change sector. And the link below, which you can access, will provide information on some of these evaluations. In 2020, we started our flagship program with King's Philanthropies, where we launched the King Climate Action Initiative to vastly expand our work on climate change. The key pillars we focus on are climate adaptation, mitigation, pollution reduction, and energy access. And more recently, extending on the work that we started with KKI in partnership with Community Jameel, we launched 3 air and water labs with government partners in Egypt, India, and South Africa. You can see some of the sectoral focus and government partners that we are working with. These regions are on the front lines of global crisis, air and water, and worsening climate challenges. So solutions for some of these problems tend to be scarce because data and evidence is fairly limited. So through these labs, we aim to work with governments at city, national, and state level to generate evidence on some of the critical climate questions. Coming into the next section, where I would focus more on the energy demand management, I think one challenge that policymakers face and their key priorities to get affordable and reliable energy to all. The challenge, however, is how do you do this in a low and middle income country where infrastructure may not be adequate for meeting large amount of new demand and the payment is fairly low. Also, fossil fuels are still widely used, which brings us to the second challenge of pollution. While the share of renewable energy in the mix is growing, there's also growing requirement for flexible energy grid to adapt to the changing demand patterns and variability of renewable energy supply. In 2017, the global investments in energy efficiency totaled to around USD 236 billion. Many policymakers promote energy efficiency as a top strategy for cutting greenhouse gas emissions. But why do people consume too much energy, and why might they have trouble in reducing consumptions? Some of the main reasons could be lack of awareness, very little financial incentive to save small amounts of energy, ingrained habits and behaviors related to energy use. Also, the pricing does not reflect the externalities to the environment, inefficient home appliances. And some of the solutions that are looked at are information to households on real-time consumption, nudges. There could be retrofits, energy efficiency programs, which could include retrofits, home audits, or replacing appliances with newer models. Some of the take-up for some of these programs, policymakers and implementing organizations often provide information on the benefits of energy efficient technologies or offer discounts and subsidies for pricing new efficient appliances. So maybe we could, kind of talk through some of the case examples that I have to share with you and learnings that we have from the work. So can social comparisons reduce overconsumption of electricity? Nudges have been studied in a variety of settings, and here is a particular important application involving the use of peer comparisons to change household energy consumption. So this was a randomized evaluation carried out in New Delhi in India, where households received weekly reports comparing their electricity use to that of their neighbors, along with conservation tips. A second group also received the same reports, coupled with monetary incentives offered by the billing agency. What we found is that households that received only the peer comparison reports reduced electricity use by 7% over 4 months and became more responsive to price changes. However, when financial incentives were added, the impact disappeared entirely, and this kind of led to an increase in consumption relative to their peers. What we learned, or what this suggests, is that incentives offered by billing entities may undermine trust or crowd out intrinsic motivation that consumers might have and limit the effectiveness of behavioral nudges. Some broad insights based on several studies that have been carried out on using nudges, that energy reports can influence people's habits in the short run and investments in the long run efficiency. Drawing on evidence from India, Mexico, and various other countries, we find that peer reports work by changing people's habits and investments in energy efficiency technologies. In the short term, monthly reports act as reminders, but in the long term, households might consider investing in more efficient technologies. Targeting of consumers is important. It may be useful to target reports to people who reduce consumption after receiving them and people who want to receive them. Wherever there is relative higher use of consumption, we find that they may be more effective overall. However, there is a risk that low energy users might actually increase their consumption once they learn about their consumption patterns. Monetary incentives may crowd out households. What we saw from the study that I just shared, utilities may be able to save costs and make customers happier overall if they're able to send the reports to people who want and value them. Moving on to another study, other area of research, we look into evidence from using smart metering or prepaid meters for improving energy access and decreasing electricity use. So expanding electrification can pose a challenge for both providers and low-income households. Traditionally, postpaid billing, where users pay after consumption, often does not align with the irregular income patterns of poorer households, leading to very high delinquency that could, affect the viability of providing access. Utilities often struggle with high costs of meter reading, billing, and disconnection enforcement. Prepaid electricity meters offer a good solution that allow households to pay in advance. So here we have a study where researchers conducted a randomized evaluation in Cape Town to measure the effect of prepaid meters on households' electricity use and the utility revenue. So in neighborhoods where the prepaid meters were studied prior to their installation, over half of the electricity bills were paid late, and 26% had multiple outstanding bills. So the researchers evaluated the impact of the prepaid meters, and the study tested whether the shift could reduce consumption and improve payment behavior. What we saw in terms of learnings was that households that switched to prepaid meters reduced their usage by 13%. This reduction persisted for at least a year following the switch. There was also an improvement in payment timelines. Revenue recovery was much better for the utility. Also, interestingly, what we saw is that while the benefits of prepaid metering were pronounced among poorer customers who had a history of delinquency with payments, what we also saw is that the utility experienced negative returns when switching customers who had previously paid their bills. So this implies that profitability of a prepaid meter could depend on the context where it's introduced. Just to kind of quickly highlight on some of the ongoing work that we have in India and Africa, India has announced one of its largest rollouts of new metering in middle income country context with a target of installing 250 million new meters by 2027. We have an ongoing study with a state in India where we're trying to evaluate the use of new technology in India, looking primarily at low payments and low quality. We also have another in Senegal that looks into access and reliability of energy to firm productivity growth. This could provide valuable evidence. So far, we've looked at households, but I think this could be very useful in looking at the welfare impacts of electrification and new meter types on firms with different characteristics. The third area that I like to talk about is on real-time pricing to reduce electricity use during peak times. So the demand of electricity peaks during summer, putting a strain on the grid. Policymakers are trying to look at low-cost ways to shift household behavior to reduce electricity use during peak hours. But households may be willing to conserve, but they don't have the necessary information or lack the incentives. In this study, researchers partnered with an electricity retailer in Japan to test behavioral nudges and price incentives on households to understand how can it influence the household energy use during peak demand hours. So there were two conservation strategies that were tested. One was a social messaging approach, and the other was a dynamic pricing, which was tested to an RCT. Dynamic pricing is where the households were informed about the electricity prices when it would significantly rise during the peak hours and provided a financial incentive to reduce usage. So what we found is both the strategies led to short-term reductions in electricity use, but the price-based notifications led to larger and a more sustained reduction. The impact of social motivation messaging diminished over time, and they returned to their habitual energy use. But the dynamic pricing group kind of maintained electricity usage, also continued to conserve energy even after the intervention ended.
Sanjana, a few more minutes left.
Yeah. So broad insights, I'll cover this quickly. Both social message motivation and dynamic pricing could reduce energy consumption in the short term, encouraging. I'm muted.
Please continue, Sanjana. We can hear you.
Okay. Encouraging energy efficient habits can lead to continued impacts of investments in new energy efficient appliances. Price signals, when they're made more visible, can lead to energy conservation. We have some work reflecting how this can be done. Also, enrolling households by default rather than relying on voluntary participation can influence consumer behavior. The last one that I hope to cover is on information campaigns and subsidies to improve energy efficiency. Here is a study which we did with 400 energy intensive units in Gujarat, where a researcher evaluated the impact of energy efficiency improvements on consumption in manufacturing firms. Here, the treatment firms received energy audits aimed at improving efficiency, and a second group received government-sponsored part-time engineers to implement some of the recommendations. And what we found is that after 2 years in the treatment plants compared to the control, there was an increase in energy consumption by 9.5% compared to the control. They ran for longer hours and hired more skilled labor, indicating that an expansion in their production services. So the study kind of suggested that energy productivity improvements complement other inputs like labor and capital and can lead to an overall energy demand, a rebound effect in a sense. Broader insights that I might skip in the interest of time and probably go to the last slide. We see that there's a lot more work that can be done. I've shared some of the evidence from our work on energy conservation and demand side interventions. What can we do in terms of next steps? We've seen the possibilities, context-driven collaborative solutions, but the potential is much more. The evidence base is growing, and the main point is that rigorous impact evaluations and energy policies are possible. And utilities, energy ministries might think about some of them. This webinar is a great platform. We look forward to disseminating our learnings, aligning goals, and sparking ideas that can shape stronger policies. We're grateful to EEAP team for providing this platform. We believe collaboration is key to drive systemic change and are open to cross-sectoral partnerships across the ecosystem with civil society, governments, funders, and communities. The AWLs, the Air and Water Labs, are in motion. We are working with partners and governments to integrate evidence into real-world policymaking and actively seek new collaborations. Please join us, reach out to us and learn more about our work or how you can collaborate. And thank you. You can find my contact details here or for more information on the Air and Water Labs, which in India is called SARVA. Thank you so much.
This is great. Thank you. Excellent presentation. A lot to learn from. As I mentioned earlier, if you have questions, please add them to the chat. There were some already, and I think I'll start with those first. For Alex, assuming Alex, you're still on. Good to see you. CT Sarah Sharun asked, I would like to know more on the ESCO aggregator platform. Who manages the platform? Is it the government or the ESCO Association?
That's a very, very good question, and it varies from one country context to another. Some countries embrace the idea that the government should set up its own super ESCO. And when that doesn't happen, the private sector steps in and sets up their own. So in the case of the Philippines, when I was in ADB, we tried to set up a super ESCO, but there was no buy-in from the government. And so when I returned to the private sector, I set it up. So, but government should also be very careful not to compete with ESCOs. I'll just say this very quickly. EESL was designed by the World Bank to be a public ESCO and a super ESCO. But sadly, the government of India shifted away from this role. I'm a big fan of EESL, by the way, because they're a large-scale energy efficiency service provider. What they're not is they're no longer an ESCO, nor are they a public ESCOs. In fact, the 150 empaneled ESCOs in India complained to me that they're not getting that support from the government, nor are they, even worse, they feel that ESL programs are robbing business from the ESCO sector. So the short answer is, if government steps in, it should be careful not to compete and crowd out the private sector ESCO market. It should be catalytic. It should give business. Not to the extreme of the US ESCO market. US ESCO market for a while, 95 to 98% of ESCO business contracts were from government, federal, municipal, and military. So we don't have to go to that extreme, but the point I'm trying to raise is governments should support the growth of the ESCO market.
I have but another question that builds upon what you've just talked about. And that is, as I'm sure many of you on this webinar have either read or heard about, the impact of the new administration on energy efficiency programs in the US. And the question somebody had, let's see if I go back here, Avtar. Was wondering what's going on in the Asia Pacific regions. Are governments rolling back their programs? Are they doing the opposite, understanding the importance of energy efficiency and renewable energy and going forth? What's your take, Alex?
We're not at all affected by one country's decision to roll back on their commitments to energy efficiency. In fact, it might the temporary political situation in that market might even serve to divert some of very country-centric, US-centric businesses to Asia Pacific, right? So capital, technology, solutions, and services might find new markets in Asia Pacific only because they felt that the policy environment in the US would not be conducive for their growth in the next 4 years. So there's an opportunity. But the quick answer is there's no stopping Asia Pacific commitment towards energy efficiency and ESCO market growth. It will have to go through with or without the support from some markets across the ocean.
Good. I have a follow-up question to that, and then we'll go to some questions for Sanjana. What about how do you get the right people into the ESCOs? And are they trained at the ESCO, or do the universities and colleges have a role to play for educating the next group of people to work in ESCOs?
That's a very good question. We ESCOs typically get people with a good engineering background out of school, and then they train them in the world, or have them trained externally with measurement and verification capacities, with energy efficiency, performance contracting capability, how to negotiate these contracts, what is a level 3 energy audit, or what we call investment grade audit. So these are the skills learned out of school, but it's the ESCOs and certain training and certification programs as a professional that will arm them with the ESCO specific skills that they will need in the business.
Okay, good. So going on to our next presentation, let's see. Targeting the right consumers. People thought that was the right way of doing it. Nina had a report that encouraged people to look at. Market documents, but if that is probably owns.
Yeah, I can take that question, Atuldeep's
Sure.
question about, what consumer and sanction load showed. I think I did mention it was more the group which had the peer comparison versus the one that received the financial incentives. And you also asked me whether we have results on the comparison group to share. I will be linking the studies to the slides, which you'll have access to. And yes, we do have results from the comparison as well.
Okay. And Avatar had a follow-up question on, do the electricity retail rates get impacted, increase or decrease as the energy efficiency programs are designed and implemented?
Can I take a first stab at that, Ed?
Sure.
Yeah, Avatar. It has an impact. As I did mention, we were starting economic studies that show that there is a correlation between the volume of energy efficiency investments and the deceleration of the rise of energy prices, whether it's electricity tariff or fossil fuel prices. But I'd like to flip it around to those markets which heavily subsidize their energy prices, and especially for an oil and gas producer, whether you're in the Middle East or in Southeast Asia, they are actually unknowingly delaying their clean energy transition. They are unknowingly making their markets less attractive to private sector capital investments for energy efficiency. So in case in point, Southeast Asia, there are only two markets which have removed subsidies: Singapore and the Philippines. So they have the best IRRs, they have the best equity returns for any energy efficiency investments. And that makes the rest of Southeast Asia, the Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam, less attractive because they get poorer investment returns in those markets. So on the flip side, it's imperative that we phase out energy subsidies as soon as possible to attract private capital investments in this new asset class called energy efficiency.
Thank you, Alex. Sanjana, the question for you is, what is the first step that should be done by government to start incorporating these behavioral insights you've mentioned as part of policy making elements?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. And I think that's precisely, what our larger goal is, that how can these insights really be used in terms of policy making. A lot of the studies that I presented were in fact with government partners, barring the one in Delhi. I think the one that I presented on Japan, Cape Town, most of them are, in a sense, kind of done in collaboration with utilities or with government partners. But I think what we do largely at JPAL is disseminate some of the evidence that we have, and see how, whether there would be an interest from the government to incorporate some of them into their policies. The two that I touched upon on smart metering, so I think more than the behavioral side interventions, which could be largely with private firms, I think the ones with the government that I mentioned on Jammu and Kashmir study, where we are looking into smart metering, I think there's a lot of interest on smart metering across countries that we see, where they are really interested to see what the response could be and what are the larger impacts over time. So I think that's broadly one, and the other in Senegal again is with the government, where we're working on understanding firm productivity. So and what I did mention is through the Air and Water Labs, we are trying to really work with governments and trying to answer the questions that are of interest to them. So the demand for a lot of these evaluations is kind of questions that they are interested to look into.
Good. I think we have time for one last question. And in the work you've presented, there was sort of opt-in or opt-out types of programs. And somebody was saying, one should be automatic. Everybody's opt-in. And if they don't want to be, they opt out. Because then you'll get more people at the beginning and maybe more interest. What do you think about that? Have everything opt-in, and it creates more of a barrier for people to get out, but at least they're in to the type of programs you're mentioning.
Yeah, I think I did cover that in some of the insights as well, that we do have some studies where we observe that having consumers opt in as the default did influence their participation. They always had the option to opt out of it. And I think there was a related question on, can this be automated in terms of managing the demand, where consumers really don't have to do anything specifically. That's again an intervention that we are testing. There is some ongoing work on that, where certain devices might which are very highly energy intensive, might actually turn off during the per peak hours, and you could use it during the off peak hours. But yes, there is a lot of work that we have done around enrolling households by default rather than voluntary participation.
Good, thank you. Again, thanks to both presenters. I'm going to hand it over to Nazir for his final remarks, but I really enjoyed both presentations. Nazir?
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Sanjana, and thanks, Alex. It was very insightful, and we really learned a lot, and I hope our audiences also took a lot from this webinar. Thanks to all the participants for your questions and your participation in this webinar. We will be hopefully sharing the presentation slides along with the summary note and the webinar recording with all of you. I have put the feedback link in the chat. Please feel free to share your feedback and suggestions. If you're interested in being part of future webinars, and if you're interested in also presenting in our future webinar, please reach out to us. You can also check resources on our website. I have put the link in the chat again. We have wealth of resources there related to energy and evaluation. And please feel free to follow our LinkedIn page. You will get a lot of updates on upcoming events. The European chapter is organizing a conference in September. You can also learn more, and you can also try to participate in the conference there. So thanks everyone. We will call it a day. Hopefully we will come back to you with another webinar next month or the following month. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.